Well, we saw him on most of the sidelines, the impassioned, stalwart coach of the UNC Tar Heels. But after Dean Smith's passing, many are remembering him as a man whose legacy stretches far beyond the court. Joining me tonight is Ed Hardin, one of the well-known sports columnists with our news-gathering partner, Greensboro News and Record. Now, Ed wrote this wonderful, great piece that's on the front page of today's edition, and it's titled, "We've Lost More Than a Coach." Thank you, Ed, for being here. I loved your article this morning. It made me think a whole lot. Now, you write, Dean Smith, was a direct link to the very soul of basketball. Embellish on that. What did you mean?
Well, he played at Kansas. He played for Fog Allen, who ironically played for James A. Naismith, who
invented basketball.
Invented the game in a YMCA in Springfield, Massachusetts. So he literally is the lineage going back to the very beginning of the game.
A descendant, his ancestors, really. Describe the college game when Dean Smith became the head coach in 1961 at 30 years old. It wasn't that pretty,
It was more, you would think it was football or hockey. I mean, it was a very physical game. You had these big, huge men inside, and you had guys in the game whose only role was to protect the scorer.
Yeah.
So if you had the biggest guy on the team was your scorer, and then you brought in these two huge forwards who just threw elbows and shoulders.
Teeth,
oh,
yeah.
It was an ugly, brutal, bloody game. You wouldn't recognize it.
And Dean kind of came in and made it more sophisticated, more finesse-like.
He absolutely
Talk to me
did.
about that.
You know, and he was criticized for that later on.
Yeah.
You know, they said, "Oh, the ACC, it's a finesse league. Carolina's a finesse team." He was changing the game. He was changing the way the game was played. It was no longer dump it into the big guy and knock everybody else out of the way.
Exactly.
Now it became the pass here, the cut, the pick, the screen, then the extra pass at the very end.
You also write, he was a mathematician at heart. That was his major at Kansas. The game, he believed, was built around the principles of logic and virtue. He was a big X's and O's type of guy.
Very much so. And it came from mathematics.
Yeah.
He didn't like a player to make a curve toward the basket. He liked straight lines.
Straight lines.
He was very geometric in that sense. He wanted a pick set, and he wanted a hard cut to the basket, and he wanted straight lines. It was very mathematical.
And his practices were so regimented.
Yes, they were. At the very second, something had to happen. You didn't go beyond that second. He brought it into the game, today's 8-minute point, but for a game when everything changes, it all came from Dean Smith when he brought his players onto the floor, when he took them off the floor and brought them back again. It was all clockwork.
You also write, quoting here, his greatest contributions to the game in this state were his stands for justice. You have to be talking about Charlie Scott, the first African-American athletic scholarship to play basketball. 1967, a tough time for race relations, and he and Charlie, they took a lot of criticism.
They absolutely did, and they took it together.
Yeah.
Charlie Scott said that Dean was his example of a person who wasn't like the people who were constantly throwing racial epithets. I mean, Dean was his example of what's right in the world, and to this day, Charlie Scott still talks about Dean in that sense. He was my great shining example of the way things were supposed to be.
We've got less than 30 seconds. Sum it up. How will Dean Smith be remembered?
He will first be remembered, I think, as a man who came to Chapel Hill and changed that town, an old southern town.
Yeah.
And was stuck in the old southern ways. He actually changed it through the churches and through the community service. And then he became a basketball coach, probably the best we ever saw.
Probably saw. Ed, a pleasure.
Hey,
thank you.
Thank
An
you
honor
so much.
to have you in. We really appreciate it. And now to someone who respected Dean Smith, even though he's a big Wolfpacker, Van Dick.
Absolutely. Well, my brother was a Carolina fan. My neighbor next door was a Carolina. So I grew up with him,
You grew up
too.
with it.
We watched all the games together. 52.